name is Haylin Chock. I work for Kiaʻi Invasive Species Committee, and we're going to jump right back into it. So, some acknowledgments that I'd like to share is that I'm not formally trained in Limu or academically trained in Limu. Everything that I learn about Limu and know about Limu is from mentors like my father. And I've been really lucky to work on a couple of projects with Auntie Nalani Kaneakua and Leiwan. Auntie Nalani started the Hosea Lovell Foundation in Anahola with the goal to bring back Limu Manuea specifically to the Anahola region, which is what used to grow there abundantly. So the goal is to do Limu outplantings and educate the community about Limu. And a olelo no ea I'd like to share is "Aohe pau ka ike ka hala ho'okahi," meaning that not all knowledge is learned in one school. So anything that I know about Limu, I've been really lucky to learn alongside just listening to them, as well as going with my father to Ohi Limu and also to learn how to clean it because it is a food source for us. And if you folks are on Kauai in the summertime, we have had an annual Limu festival in Anahola for the last 2 years, and hopefully we'll go on a third year. It's usually between July and August. We haven't set a date yet, but if you want to come learn from Limu experts who have degrees and many, many, many years in studying Limu, please come to that. So to get started, before we jump straight into Limu, we need to understand where we are in the ahupua'a and the difference between a healthy ahupua'a system and an unhealthy one and how it affects everything downstream. This is a beautiful illustration of Limahuli Valley. And as you can see, the connection between the uplands and the lowlands are the streams. The streams and the rivers are blue in an ideal, perfect, healthy forest. And unfortunately, we no longer live in a completely native environment anymore. Now we deal with invasive species, which is what I talk about all the time in my job. And as we can see, this is just one example of how it impacts our landscape. So in 1980, this photo is taken on the Big Island. As you can see, there are clear views of the horizon. There's very minimal, large invasive canopies that are taking over. There's a couple of invasives right in the frame. But then if you look to 2021, there's a whole canopy of albizia. And if you're familiar with albizia, especially during storms, that's when they make their presence known, is that albizia grow incredibly tall, incredibly fast, but they're really brittle. And what'll happen is that when a big storm comes and knocks down all those trees, that can become a clog and it can block up, create like a dam, and then eventually cause like a flash flooding because when the water gets to a point where it pushes it down, it can cause a flash flooding, which is what we've seen on Kauai many times, especially in the Wailua River. So, invasives in the watershed. The difference between a native forest and an invasive forest is that here in this photo that we have on the slide is that a native forest is able to slow that water down because there are so many layers for the water to be absorbed. So we have our ohia and our native tree canopy that catches the first amounts of rain, and then we go to our mid-story or understory, and which is our tree ferns, our other ferns, our shrubs that grow, and then the ground cover. And another thing that I'd like to point out is that the ground cover and the mosses are also growing on the native trees that act like a sponge to kind of soak up all that moisture and slow it down from becoming like a flood situation. It's also really great for our aquifer because it allows that trickle or that to go down into our aquifer slowly, and it's not going to just wash away. Okay. And then invasive species. So some of the invasive species that we focus on at KISC are Miconia. KISC has been working on Miconia for the entire time KISC has been uh, open, so about 22, 23 years now. Um, and it has been one of our main targets. We've been luckily able to keep it in a contained area of Kauai, and it has not spread to become a big issue. I know on Hawaii Island, for you in Hilo, I know you probably see Miconia all over the place, especially, north of Hilo. I see it all the time. And the reason why Miconia is such a threat to our forest is that these trees can grow up to 50 feet tall and they create an umbrella effect with their leaves. So the leaf, a single leaf, can be around 3 feet long and around 1 foot wide. So imagine each of these leaves being like its own umbrella panel. What happens is that they like to grow close together, so they create a monoculture, almost like when you walk through a strawberry guava thicket. Another concern is that they have really shallow root systems and they cause landslides. And here, this is a photo from Tahiti. As you can see, there are just monotypic stands of Miconia, and there's very shallow root systems causing these dramatic landslides. And another fun fact that I'd like to share is that Miconia can produce up to 3 million seeds a year, and the seeds are the size of a grain of sand. And those grains of sand that can get stuck in your boots or your tires or the mud on your clothes and spread to other places can be viable for up to 20 years. So as you know, you have all these facts about this particular plant, you can see why it's categorized as a very high priority species. The next one I'd like to point out, which we're all probably familiar with, is strawberry guava. They grow in dense thickets, and as you can see in the photo here, there's nothing really growing underneath it. So I like to call them bully plants when I talk to classes. They kind of push their way into the forest and they don't share any resources or sun. Um, they can invade from multiple elevations, so from sea level all the way up to 4,000 feet. They displace native plants, of course, because they're bully plants, and they provide a refuge for other invasive species like fruit flies and a food source for ungulates like deer and pigs that come through the forest. So it's a great, treasure trove for them when it's strawberry guava season, which of course, can inhibit the spread of rot, unfortunately, because they are ungulates that travel through our forests. Strawberry guava forests can lose up to 27% more water than a native ohia forest. And if any of you have been hiking in a thicket like this before, you can see almost a waterfall effect. I saw this with the last rain that we had on Kauai on the guava tree by my house. It was just a waterfall just streaming off, nothing to catch it. There's no mosses to hold on to that water. And of course, it's all going to flow down and create a flooding effect. Some more invaders that I'd like to point out. We talked about Albizia, we talked about strawberry guava, but other ones, especially here on Kauai in the Alaka'is, in our forest, we deal with Himalayan ginger. And it is a very aggressive ginger. It will outcompete all of our native ferns and our understory, and it'll just take over. And if anyone has volunteered with KRCP to take this out, you know it's incredibly hard to take out. They grow in their roots, their rhizomes are probably as big as like some chests or those big black and yellow containers that you have at Costco. Some of them are that big. And another concern from a different perspective is pampas grass. So KISC actually eradicated pampas grass from a section of Koke'e a while back. And it was a particularly concerning variety of pampas grass because I believe it was self-pollinating. So we worked with Kauai Fire Department to get rid of that one. And the reason why we were working on that one particularly is that it is a fire starter plant. And with, Hawaii seeing so much extreme climate disasters in recent years, uh, a lot of these plants, like pampas grass, fireweed, they exacerbate these natural disasters because it inhibits that kind of habitat or that environment and conditions for a disaster like that to happen. And then, you know, as we've seen on Maui, with large fires, it clears out all the green. And then when we are followed by our rains the next season, it can create flash flooding because there's nothing to hold the water back. So layers of the forest and erosion. It's important for our forest to be healthy so that we have all those layers to kind of like catch the water as it comes down, slows it down before it creates an erosion effect, especially through our streams. The timing of this talk couldn't have come at a more appropriate time, I feel like, especially with how much devastation we've seen on the other islands and the direct effects of a storm, climate change, as well as how invasive species have played a part. I actually just saw a video yesterday of somebody on Oahu who is still seeing flooding, and they had taken precautions to plant along their side of the riverbed with native plants that would hold the soil together. And you could see a clear distinction between their side that was holding very strong and then the opposite side that didn't have any of that kind of native plant buffer and it was washing away in chunks. So we're starting to see it directly affecting our people. And where does all that end up? So it's not only soil that comes down from the mountains now because we're here, us people, and it'll pick up things like chemicals, it'll pick up, waste, human waste, animals that get washed down, and it all ends up in our limu. And unfortunately, for some of us who see limu as a food source, we have to be really concerned about is it safe to eat the limu? Is it clean? How long do we have to wait for it to clean itself out from all these things? So the importance of limu, we're getting to the meat of this presentation, is that limu is incredibly important because it's a foundational species to all life on Earth. Our marine plants make up to 50% of Earth's oxygen, and limu are some of the oldest kupuna in the Hawaiian scope of creation, meaning our Kumulipo. It's part of the first va, or the first age of things coming into existence in the Kumulipo. And if you're unfamiliar with the Kumulipo, that's fine. We will go into that in our next slide. So, what is the Kumulipo? The Kumulipo is a procreation chant. It's a creation chant of how everything came to be in the Hawaiian universe. It's about 2,102 lines, and it is in Olelo, Hawaii. It was documented and published by King David Kalakaua in 1889 and later translated into English by his sister Queen Liliuokalani in 1897. I personally have not even gone through the whole Kumulipo. I've only been able to absorb it in sections. It's a really amazing chant to see how our kupuna were able to view the world and create a language and a story and a song about it that was able to be passed down all the way to now. Um, and also, I wanted to point out that it affirms that the land that we live on and the creatures we live with are part of our ohana and that we should treat them as such because if you read the Kumulipo as like a mo'okuauhau or a genealogy, we all come from the same parentage of the universe. So there are about eight va or ages that go through how different species come into existence. I believe humans, and don't quote me on this, I don't know it for sure, but I do believe humans come in around the fourth or fifth va. I could be wrong, but it's definitely after our limu. Um, so here's a section. Instead of jumping straight to the lines that talk about Limu, I wanted to point out the beginning. So the very first line, it talks about um, everything coming from this primordial darkness, this primordial slime. It also has references to certain star constellations like the Pleiades, and a timing of when it all happens. So it gives us a time marker of the year, which is really cool. But if you would like to read through it, we can just go through some of that. At the time when the earth became hot, at the time when the heavens turned about, at the time when the sun was darkened to cause the moon to shine, the time of the rise of the Pleiades, the slime, this is the source of the earth, the source of the darkness that made the source of the night, that made night. This intense darkness, a deep darkness, a darkness of the sun, a darkness of the night. Nothing but night, the night gave birth. Born was a Kumulipo, in the night a male. Born was Po'ele, the night a female. So it's very interesting. There is, if you look at other creation chants around the world, there's Greek goddesses like Nyx that are like a goddess of night. And it's interesting how these long ancient cultures and our cultures have almost had like a similar creation stories that everything comes from darkness. So we jump to line 35 in the first va still, And as I go through these slides, there's about four examples. I want you to take your time and kind of look at the similarities between the Limu as well as their upland counterpart, not only in the similarities of their name, but maybe their physical characteristics, and maybe it'll give us some clues as to why they were named that. So in line 35, it says, Hanau ke akaha noho ikai. Born was the Ekaha moss living in the sea. Line 36, Kiaʻi ia kaʻekahakaha no noho I uka, guarded by the ekahakaha fern living on land, which is also known as our bird's nest fern. So if you have any similarities, please put that in the chat that you would like to see or that you see that are observations. And I'd like to look at it at the end of the Zoom to kind of see what everyone's observations were. So the word I want us to focus on is Kiaʻi, and this is from vehevehe.org, and it says to guard, a watchman, a caretaker, to watch guard, picket, or to overlook as a bluff. That last part is very interesting to me because our native plants up in the forest are, of course, above where their counterparts are in the sea. So it's interesting that our kupuna chose the word Kiaʻi specifically. The next example here is line 41, Hanauka Akiaki no Hoikai. Born was the tough seagrass living in the sea. And line 42 is Kiaʻi ia e ka manene Akiaki no ho Iuka, so guarded by the tough grass living on land. And if any of you have seen Akiaki or worked with Akiaki, you would know that it's incredibly hard you can't, it's not like a limu kohu where you can go and pinch it with your fingers and it'll come off easily. It's very hard. You need like some shears to cut that off. Um, the other cool fun fact that I learned through Napua no Eao when I worked with Auntie Nalani and Auntie Lei is we did a Zoom cooking show with Limu because at the time we were all still on lockdown. And we called it Auntie Limu Lani's Cooking Show, where we cooked with this particular limu. And it has similar compounds like agar-agar. It's like a thickener agent. So what we made was actually a mango aki jello. I know that Auntie Nalani also does a ogo mochi at the Limu Festival every year. And I was also told that this particular limu was used before we had cornstarch for our stews and our squid luau and soups that needed to be thickened. So the kupuna would add it and it would thicken up the soup. Um, Also, just a disclaimer, if you decide to try and cook with this, please get it from a clean source. Make sure it's not close to any polluted waterways. Please be mindful if you decide to try that. This is not my cooking advice. And then also we have our tough grass here, and you can, if you were there, at the beach, you would be able to see that where this grass is, it really holds on to sand well. It kind of creates like a barrier from any kind of erosion, especially when tides come up, which is really cool. Okay, the next example is um, line 47. Hanau ka Alaula nohoi kai, born was the Ala moss living in the sea. Another name I believe is called Vavaiole. This one's also edible. I have had a version of this, I believe at Paipaiʻoheʻia when I was like 12 years old. They cooked it. And then line 48 is Kiaʻi ia e ka ala vainui. So noho yuka. So guarded by the ala mint living on land. So the next one is kava in the Kava'akahi, so line 83. We skipped a couple lines, quite a few, but it's because I have experience with some of these limus. So born was the kala seaweed living in the sea, limu kala. And then line 84 is Kiaʻi ia e ka akala no hoiuka, so guarded by the akala vine living on land. This is our native raspberry. And if you have touched limu kala before, you know it has these little kind of spines and spikes on each of those limu leaves. And I'm sure it would be very similar if you think about raspberry. It has its own little spikes on it. And even if you look at the uh, leaves of the Akala here versus the leaves of the Limu kala. So similarities in the name, as well as similarities in some physiology. So for all these examples, they have a demonstration of pilina, a connection or a relationship, and pilina is not just a general connection, like they seem similar. There's a intimate relationship with these plants, is that they're tied to each other. Which is very interesting, again, because we say that they're Kiaʻi, or they're stewards, they're guardians of their counterpart in the ocean. So when we look at the Kumulipo and the wisdom of our kupuna, what are we getting from it? I have made the conclusion that, less Kiaʻi plants up Mauka means less protectors for the ocean. And we're seeing this play out in climate disasters, because our forests are not the same amount of native plants as they used to be. The species on land are intrinsically tied to the species in the ocean. Um, they have that relationship, and these figures are actually from a USDA published study, so part of their forestry division, and they did a survey of all of Hawaii, and it showed that 75% of forests in lower elevation areas of all the islands were dominated by non-native trees, and 31% of the higher elevation forests were dominated by non-native trees. In conclusion, they had a I guess they had a point where they wanted to share, was that in all forest types, non-native trees constituted a larger portion of the understory versus the overstory. And that points to a potential eventual replacement of our native canopy by non-native trees. So they're seeing these seedlings being more dominant, as they're coming up through the understory, and eventually will take over our overstory. So it's very concerning, because we look at the wisdom of our kupuna and look at the science of what we're seeing now, and then we're seeing the result of that all play out now. So what can we do? I know during these times it feels like we're kind of helpless of what can we do in our own homes. We can plant more natives, like those folks who I saw who had planted a native border along their stream. If you do border a stream, maybe take it upon yourself to do the same thing. So adopt your own section of the stream. And then support organizations who focus on Mauka restoration, testify for bills that support native habitat protection and restoration, or even pushing for, more native plant installments, a certain percentage. I don't know of any bills right now that I could recommend, but keep your eye on legislation, and support Plant Pono endorsed businesses. So a Plant Pono endorsed business is a program that we run in partnership with our local nurseries and landscapers, where they get trained on what are some of the most invasive plants that they pledge to not bring in or to plant. They also practice best management recommendations to minimize the amount of invasive species they bring in or spread, or, even have. We've had really great relationships with some local nurseries who we've helped them, stop little fire ant from spreading, or coqui frogs, or sometimes CRB, and it's been really great because the community is able to put their trust in these local businesses and to continue that relationship. And then finally, we can't talk about flooding and erosion without, of course, acknowledging our folks on all the islands who have been dealing with very dramatic flooding, and so many people's lives have been affected. So, of course, I wanted to share these. This is from Hawaii Public Radio. They had put together lists of how you can malama folks on different islands and through different organizations. So if you'd like to screenshot it, and save it for later, or you could also go to their social medias and find this as well. But yeah, if you can kokua, I know that Oahu, Maui, and Molokai especially, because it's hard to get things to Molokai right now. It's very important. So I just wanted to call out support for our friends on other islands. Hawaii is no stranger to having flood damage at all. And then finally, I have some sources. So if you would like to read any of those studies that I pulled my facts from. by all means. I'll leave this here for you guys.
Thank you so much, Haylin. And I'm seeing some, what do we call them? Emojis flying up and some notes in the chat. Mahalo, Haylin. Thank you. Um, are you good for a couple of questions?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, fabulous. Because, you know me, I have the
yeah.
question. And I encourage anybody else, if you have questions, to add them to the chat is fine, or put them in the Q&A, whatever's the easiest for you to find. Um, I want to talk about this connection, the Maukota Makai connection with the various plants, and I think it's true with animals as well, right? Um, and step back into like the bigger philosophical thinking, and maybe just, I know that you positioned yourself at the forefront as, you're just a student, just like the rest of us. But you have a little more education than I do on this. But when it comes to the Kumulipo and this pairing of a land-based plant or animal and the marine-based plant or animal, can you maybe discuss a little bit more on what do you think the overriding decision or thinking behind that is? It's fascinating, and it from a cultural standpoint, you mentioned other cultures that have somewhat similar parts of a creation story, but I don't know about this. I don't see this in other cultures, the pairing, and that's my ignorance, but I think it's fascinating, and I was wondering if you might want to elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, I really like this question because this is just my own observations and what I feel is the
Sure.
purpose of having our kupuna, like our kupuna put these lines in there. It's showing, especially when you read through all of like the further vase where they talk about um the actual animals like veke and vauke, and they talk about like Nenue and Pohuehue. So there's there's all these different connections. Or even, there's Olelo no Ea that talk about when the Vili Vili
Mhm.
bloom,
Mhm.
then that's when sharks are around.
Right.
It just it shows that our kupuna were incredibly observant and in tune with their surroundings, and they were very much a part of their surroundings in everything that they do, to the point of seeing that relationship. But also, with having these particular verses in there, I think it really demonstrates like a web and a reinforcing relationships. The importance of relationships, I think, in Hawaiian culture are huge and they're foundational. I mean, even when we go to places, traditionally you would oli and you would ask permission, even if you don't know these people that you're going to. And then sometimes you would be asked to chant your mo'okuauhau and like your entire genealogy all the way back to see what relationships you have with the people that you're visiting at the time. Or if you're on another island, there's so many mo'olelo about chiefs going to different places and Pele coming here and being able to chant all the winds of Kauai to prove that she's from Kauai when she wasn't from Kauai. But but she's able to, pull that out and to prove to the people of Kauai, like, hey, I know my stuff, I know my relationships here. And that kind of also calls back to the theme of Pilina. Pilina being deeper than just the word connection. Like the English word connection just doesn't quite encapsulate the deeper meaning of Pilina. Uh it's like you're tied to something and you know it intimately. Um, yeah, that's some of my mana'o behind it.
Yeah, I find that so fascinating, right? And like you say, just the awareness and the intimate relationship with all parts of
Yeah.
nature, I mean, is
It's
so
also
impressive, right?
It also having those relationships and being foundational in your upbringing, like say you knew about those relationships, it's impossible to separate yourself as a human from the relationships of nature. Like you're constantly anthropomorphizing them, like
Hmm.
seeing them as a living ancestor or a living cousin, and I think that's part of probably the problem of our modern world is people don't see themselves intimately connected to all the things around us.
Right, right. Yeah, so true. Um, So thinking specifically now on Limu, and thank you for the ones that you shared. And thank you also for the tidbits on the cooking. That was fascinating. Um, I'm assuming not all Limu is edible. Is
Yeah.
that correct?
Yep.
Okay. Especially
Don't just
this.
go on the reef and eat whatever. Like, know what you're
Exactly.
eating.
And that's kind of my point. But also related to that is what like if somebody was interested and obviously we're getting questions about the Limu festival that occurs usually this in the summer, and I'll include that announcement of that once the date is settled and the exact location in a future newsletter, and everybody who's in attendance today will is probably already on my Ohia Love newsletter email list, but if not, you're going to get that in the future. So we'll announce it when Haylin tells me it is. I'll make sure that I include it in future newsletter. But question, until then, if we're not able to attend the Limu Festival, or we're so excited by your presentation. In fact, I was so engaged that I forgot to include all of the links that I said I was going to put in the chat. I was like, oh, wait, I forgot to do that. Um, are there places around the island that you would recommend for somebody to safely maybe look for some of these limu and then try to draw those connection with the land-based plants? Um,
Thank you
that's
for the
part one
question.
of the question, and then part two is how do you ethically and respectfully maybe check them out?
Yeah. So, for the first part of the question, where to go? Um, I will start off with saying that if you're not Pili to that place or to that certain reef, or if you're like Pili as in, have relationship with that place, but also aren't unaware of like the ocean conditions of that place, like don't go. Um, yeah, because the ocean can be scary. I think I feel the most connected to the universe that way because you're really playing with your life out there sometimes.
Right.
Um, but really having Pilina to a specific reef, like don't go just to anywhere and be like, oh, that looks like a good place, but it could be somebody's harvesting ground. And if you're not Pili to it, or if you're just going to kind of look around, it might actually hinder the growth of the limu because you're stepping on things you're unaware of. There are opportunities that occasionally come up with like Hui Maka and Nano Makana. They sometimes have workshops, but definitely go out with somebody who's seasoned of that area. Wait for those opportunities. Be safe, watch the ocean conditions, but also when it comes to harvesting, being respectful of the people who are of that place. So, um, like not going to a place and taking all their limu kohu or going on a space. So really get clearance from the people from those areas before you decide to go is the biggest thing, and creating those relationships within community so that you are doing the most respectful practice. Um, yeah, so like example would be Haena is a community-based, fishery area. Um, I am not going to go and pick out there unless I am with someone from there, and I get permission. So asking permission, building those relationships is incredibly important. Um, and also there are invasive limu on the island, so they can be carried with your tabis, especially the felt bottom ones. So I know there's some invasive limu, like the grizzly limu that grows on the south side. And if you were to go on the south side and not completely dry out your and wash out your tabis and then go somewhere else, you
Mm.
could pick up spores from that limu and then spread it to another beach. So anytime you're going between areas, it's important to dry out, wash out thoroughly, and let it completely dry out before you go to another place. Scrub out as much sand as you possibly can. Um, and yeah, if you want to learn any more about invasive limu too, there's a whole list on like the Division of Aquatic Resources that talks about their target limus. We have a couple of them, like one of them is Gorilla Ogo. I don't believe we have them here, but on Molokai and Oahu, it's been terrible.
Yeah.
Um, so that was the first part of the question. And then when it comes to safety of eating limu, again, going with an expert is the best way you can do it. There's some where if you were to eat it, it has the same kind of crystal structures like when you eat uncooked kalo. So you can eat it and then you got all these crystals stuck in your throat. You don't want to try that. So And all these things I've learned over years of, going multiple times with Auntie Nalani onto the reef and learning tidbits here and there. It's not all one time. And it's a
Mhm.
continuous journey of learning. But I think understanding relationships in spaces and respecting the people who live there and who have picked from there first is the most important thing. So you can build your relationships with everybody there too.
I love that message, right? And that thinking and that message is true for Limu as well as everywhere else on the island and all of the other natural, what we would call today natural resources, and just being respectful and aware, right?
It's very much like if someone were to come to your house and look through your fridge and take what they want.
Right,
You don't want that.
right,
So,
right. Yeah,
or they walk in your house with dirty slippers. You don't
yeah,
want that.
yeah.
And I think we see this problem as well, not only with Limu, but Opihi, other coastline resources where people from other places will come and raid the whole thing. But
Hmm.
if you were to
Right.
go and like pull, like for example, Limu Kohu, you're not supposed to grab it from the hold fast, which is the root system that holds on to the reef. You're supposed to use a scissors to
Hmm.
pinch it and
Hmm.
also or cut it so that it's like a grass. If you
Right.
pull the root, it's not going to grow back and something else will grow back in its place. But if you cut it, it'll grow back stronger. So
Right.
sometimes people have relationships where they're able to go check out the limu, trim it, and then come back in a couple of months and it's better. So
Hmm.
those people are the ones who have the relationship with it, that they've been tending to it. Um, and yeah, never pull the hold fast. That's not good. It's like pulling the roots.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big problem with a lot of people. They see a wave and they're like, I don't want to get smoked, so I'm just gonna rip it. Like, don't do
Don't do that.
that.
Don't do that. In the chat, I don't know if you have a second to look there. Solimar, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. And if you want to unmute yourself, feel free to do so. Had shared some wonderful information. Windward Community College is offering various online courses focusing on Limu. And if you, there she is.
Hi
Share.
everyone. Sorry, no, I actually great talk, Haylin. I got emailed this link from a friend of a friend and they're like, "Hey, this is Limu related. You should go." So I missed the first part of your talk, but I definitely wanted to put in my Windward Community College plug because we do have a Limu certificate program at WCC, and we have
Amazing.
scholarships for students who are wanting to pursue a certificate. So we've been offering courses for the last 2.5 years. But anyone who's wanting to learn more about Limu, we have a variety of like in person, obviously on Oahu, and then we have some online options for people to take. So we're looking into actually doing more online for the fall and see if we can partner with some
Nice.
um, high school because we have a ton of interest with high school students who want to take courses. So obviously I'm on Oahu, but if anyone is on Oahu or wants to come or you're coming to Oahu and you want to go on a Limu walk with me, I'm always happy to guide people and take you to safe spaces where you can come and see some of the amazing Limu that we have here on our island. Um,
That is
yeah.
such a generous offer. Thank you. And you also shared that your Oahu is having a Limu Festival in
Yes.
Waimanalo on April 25th, so right around the corner. So
Yes. Yes. It's organized by the Waimanalo Limu.
fabulous. I love it. And
Awesome.
for either one of you, Halen, or and I am I pronouncing it correctly? Solimar?
Solimar, yes.
Solimar. Solimar. Okay. Um, we part of Halen, the front end of Halen's talk, she talked about the importance of our native ohia forest and the layers, how we have the overstory and we have the understory and we have the ground cover and, all of that and how important that is for so many reasons, for us even here down at the lowlands. That just triggered all this Limu talk. Will either one of you maybe address like the role of Limu in our ecosystem in that coastal area, right? I gotta figure there's some sort of similar role that it's playing in protecting.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like especially if you think about like our limestone apapa, like without the limu, it's really just open to the elements. The limu has its root systems that hold it all together. It's a food source for our fish. Like I'm a reef
Mhm.
fish girly myself, not so much a pelagic fish person, but
Mhm.
I personally like to eat reef fish a lot. But also having like, the the understanding of when to eat the reef fish
Mhm.
and when to gather. Also they're seasonal. A lot of our limu are seasonal. Like Palahalaha, for example. I danced Merry Monarch in 2023 and we all had Palahalaha lays, and let me
Mhm.
tell you, trying to get that in April, it was like an impossible feat. And being able to train 25 women on how to get it was very and get it ethically was quite a challenge.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it's a seasonal indicator, I think.
Mhm.
Like Palahalaha comes in the summertime, not so much a spring, versus Kohu is better for me here, at least in the earlier spring, before it burns. And then yeah. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of other things. So of course it's like the foundational food source for our fish that go into our reef fish, and then it goes into our bigger fish and then goes to us,
Mhm.
So the health of
Mhm.
our limu ultimately will bioaccumulate to us. So we got to think about that. It will affect us eventually.
Right. Yeah, lots of good information. And Vanessa just shared a program at Kauai Community College, a plant and tropical ag certification, if anybody's interested. So that link is in the chat. And I've hogged all the Q&A time. So does anybody else have questions they want to ask? And it's a informal group, so feel free to unmute yourself if that's easier to communicate. I know some people are sometimes on iPhones or, out and about, and sometimes it's just easier to unmute yourself. But feel free to do that. And if I don't see anything more coming in question-wise, Haylin, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just grateful for you all to be here with me and to listen to my ramblings. And giving me grace, again, I said I'm not formally trained in this or academically trained in this. This is all just community, what I learned from these amazing women and my dad and their dads. I'm really grateful to have spent time with them, and I hope to continue to spend time and learning with them. And, thank you again for the really great questions that covered, ethics and harvesting. And Solimar, thank you for sharing that. Do you guys work with Uncle Wally and Kua?
Yes, yes, we do.
They are the rock stars of
And
Limu.
don't
I
and
love
don't
them.
discredit your ancestral knowledge, Haylin. Like that is we have to make space for both our ancestral knowledge and this traditional Western knowledge
Oh,
that is trained academically. Like that is all super valuable information that you're
yeah.
carrying.
Oh
Thank you
yeah,
for
thank
saying
you.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. I did want to share with everyone, if you are interested in recipes, Limu Eater is a book that was published recently, kind of recently, but it's called Limu Eater, and I think it's from UH Press, and it's a cookbook of Limu.
That's
So
fabulous.
go check it out.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely let everybody know when this year's Kauai Limu Festival happens, because I think another thing that comes across, Halen, when you're sharing is just your passion and your interest, and the fact that you do have ancestral knowledge to share. The fact that you are maybe not academically trained is the perfect combination because I think so often what many of us it's your passion and your interests. And I think as people, right, the more we can engage with our curiosity, and that's what's led you, I'm guessing, to work with Auntie Nolani and to study Limu in your, in the way that you have. I think the more curious we are as people, the better, right? The more we will learn,
Mhm.
the more we will care, the more we will ensure that there is a future for these many different varied things. And so, yes, the mango jelly recipe, that totally sounded good. I agree with you, especially with mango season right around the corner.
Yeah.
A
Yeah,
good one.
so
Good
you
one.
can follow me up with on an email, Solimar, and then I can get back to you. My email is on the KISC website, or I can drop it in the chat here. It's just kisk@hawaii.edu. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to email me as well.
Fabulous. And I will send the recording out in the next day or two. For those of you who maybe missed the front half, or want to watch it again, because I definitely know that there's a couple photographs that I want to look back at a little more closely. So, again, everybody, thank you so much. Next month, our talk is going to be about this wonderful book called Under the Ohia Tree. So I hope you all can join me. The author will be here. She's going to read it. She's going to tell us the inspiration behind it. And she, like Haylin, is her passion and her curiosity come through, right? Just in hearing her share and talk. So I hope you all can make that. Follow the newsletter. It'll be announced there. Otherwise, have a great day.
Thank you for
Again,
coming.
yeah,
Bye.
thank you for coming. Take very good care during this somewhat intrepid weather we're experiencing. Ahuyo.
Aloha, everyone.